can't believe I'm here, playing for my life tonight. I can't believe I'm here, I made it, I'm playing for my life tonight. I'm a shining light. I can't believe I'm here. I can't believe I'm here, playing for our life tonight. Yeah, I'm playing for our life tonight.
Welcome to Kingdom Driven Sports Friends. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to come check out my channel and to support my podcast. I appreciate it greatly. If you haven't subscribed yet, I hope that you will, and I hope that you'll also like the video. This video is going to be a continuation on the For the Love of series. The first one was on the love of baseball, which was my first true sports love as a kid. I then did one on basketball where I shared some of my favorite memories and teams and how I got into basketball. And today I wanted to talk to you about the sport of football. Because of the three major sports, football was the one that I got into a little bit later, was more towards the end of the 90s instead of the beginning or mid 90s. And so I thought I'd share my story with you of how I became a football fan, my first exposure to the sport, and what are some things that I've enjoyed about the sport and some of the things that maybe I've seen change over the years. But I just wanted to give you a little bit of insight into my football passion. It is probably my favorite sport at this time, and I enjoy watching it. I enjoy even the off season, like free agency and the NFL draft, just watching college players compete and then get excited because they're awaiting their name to be called on one of the draft days, especially with round one players. They get super excited. But I thought I'd share a little bit about my story, especially if you've heard or watched the previous videos, the one on baseball and the one on basketball. This one's a little bit different in who I root for, and I'll explain that here shortly. As you can probably tell from my shirt, I am a Kansas City Chiefs fan. In college, I followed the Ohio State Buckeyes, but in the NFL, I actually follow the Kansas City Chiefs. I remember one of my first exposures to football was the 1995 Super Bowl. I remember watching it, and while I didn't really understand too much of what was going on, I just knew that my friends were rooting for the Dallas Cowboys to win. They were playing the Pittsburgh Steelers, and so I wanted to be like my friends and root for the Cowboys. And I even remember at one point as a kid, I had a Dallas Cowboys wallet, I think. One of those Velcro ones. I just remember that was my first exposure. Didn't really know too much about the game, how it worked, and just wanted to, my friends are rooting for the Cowboys, I'm going to root for the Cowboys. Obviously, that didn't stick. I remember another exposure I got was in the 5th grade. My teacher had a football game on the computer, and if we had earned free time and did what we were supposed to, he would set up a system where we would get to go play football games against each other, and we got to choose our teams. On the game, the Cleveland Browns were available, and so I chose them because I knew for a fact that my dad was a Cleveland Browns fan. And so I was like, I'm going to be the Cleveland Browns. I also remember a friend of mine chose the Kansas City Chiefs, and I was like, oh, interesting. I was born in Kansas. So at that time, I thought, Kansas City must be in Kansas. That's pretty cool. Of course, it wasn't until later I realized, it's Kansas City, Missouri. Still, at that time, I thought it was pretty cool. And so anyways, we would play that game, and you would select plays. I remember if you were on offense, you got to select a play, and then you had to turn around, and the defense got to select the play. And you couldn't look because you could see what keys you were pushing to select whatever play you wanted. My go-to play was a Hail Mary, which in real life would be ridiculous to do that. But yeah, I remember it actually worked pretty well in the game. But I say that because I remember when it's like, okay, I want to get into football. I want to keep watching. I want to root for a team and hope that they make the Super Bowl. I had planned on continuing in my father's guidance to root for Ohio teams, specifically Cleveland teams. And so I was like, I'll root for the Cleveland Browns. But come to find out, at that time, the owner, Art Modell, had recently moved the Cleveland Browns to Baltimore to become the Baltimore Ravens, which they still are to this day. They are the Baltimore Ravens. They're a fantastic team. They're always in the running for the possibility of making a Super Bowl. They have one of the top 3 to 5 best quarterbacks in the game in Lamar Jackson. They have Derrick Henry, who's a beast of a running back. And so the Cleveland Browns had become the Baltimore Ravens, who've ended up winning 2 Super Bowls in total so far. And they're a really good team. And the move, of course, that meant that Cleveland no longer had a team. And so when I went to choose a team to root for, there were no Cleveland Browns. And of course, at that time, I didn't know that they would return just a few years later. Nor did I even think to choose Cincinnati, which is also an Ohio team. It just didn't dawn on me because, like I said, in that 5th grade class, I remembered my friend chose the Kansas City Chiefs. And I was like, that's really cool. And so when I discovered that the Cleveland Browns were no longer an option, I immediately went to the Kansas City Chiefs. I said, that's going to be my team. I'm going to root for them. Die-hard fan. And I've been with them since the days of Elvis Gerbach. That's the first quarterback I remember. Elvis Gerbach, a product of Michigan. I believe he was a backup to Steve Young. Kansas City was able to get him, and he was a quarterback for them for quite a few years. I remember thinking later on when the Chiefs got Alex Smith, how ironic it was that Alex Smith was on the Niners as well, and we got him from them, just like we got Elvis Gerbach from them. Alex Smith is probably one of my all-time favorite Kansas City Chiefs. Everything I've heard on the guy is just, he's awesome. He's such a great guy, and I definitely appreciated him as a player. I don't think he often got enough credit for how far he took those Chiefs teams with Andy Reid's offense. But when I got started, it was Elvis Gerbach. He was definitely not a mobile quarterback, but he had a really good arm. I do remember there was a stretch. I'm sure you guys will recognize the name Rich Gannon. He went on to have a great career with the Oakland Raiders. Before he had gone to the Raiders, he was the backup in Kansas City. And I remember there was a stretch there where Elvis Gerbach was injured, and Rich Gannon took over and played, and he played very well. And I remember when Elvis Gerbach came back and was healthy, in my mind, I was like, why don't you continue to play the hot hand? Rich Gannon has done very well. Just stick with him until he starts doing poorly. That didn't happen, of course. And of course, I didn't have the knowledge of the financial aspect of the game where if you're paying someone a certain amount of money, you want them to be on the field if they can play. But I just remember as a kid wanting Rich Gannon to continue as quarterback. It was nothing against Elvis Gerbach. I just was appreciative of the winning at the time and wanted to see how far Rich Gannon could take us. He went on to go play for the Oakland Raiders, the then Oakland Raiders. They're now the Las Vegas Raiders, of course. But he took the Oakland Raiders to the Super Bowl, but had the misfortune of facing his former coach in John Gruden and that Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense that was brutal. They had Derek Brooks, Warren Sapp, and John Lynch, and it was just too much for them to overcome. But still, Rich Gannon had a great career with the Raiders. But I remember when he was on the Chiefs, and then of course I remember Elvis Gerbach. I remember Derek Thomas on the defense. What an incredible player. He was definitely a problem for offenses to have to deal with. Great at getting the sack, and just had that unrelenting motor inside him. The tragic part is that I remember when he got in a car accident and ended up dying a few days later, I believe from the injuries and the effects of the car accident. But it was pretty sad and devastating because he was so young and so full of life, and to have lost his life at that point in his life was just a tragedy beyond words. But I remember when he would play, I remember watching one of the games where he just sacked Jeff George over and over again. and they couldn't contain him, and he was just wreaking havoc in the backfield there. An excellent player. My first favorite player was probably Andre Rison, and when I was a kid, I really liked him because his nickname was Spider-Man, and because I was really into comic book characters, Batman being my favorite. I just attached to him very quickly. He was a really good receiver. He had traveled around quite a bit, but he did play at that time for the Chiefs and was pretty good. Him and Derek Alexander. Of course, we had Tony Gonzalez as tight end, and he's gone down as one of the best tight ends in NFL history. Crazy to think that right after him, we got Travis Kelce, and he's also going to go down as one of the greatest tight ends in NFL history. And so we've been spoiled in the tight end department, that's for sure. But I remember when I really started feeling that passion about the game and learning more and more about it and paying attention and wanting to watch every week. It was during my collegiate years when I was in Tulsa, Oklahoma, attending Oral Roberts University. I had the privilege, because we were so close to Kansas City, that they were usually the game that was on every week on CBS. So I had that opportunity to watch them almost every week. During that era, they had Trent Green as quarterback. They had Johnny Morton as a wide receiver, along with Eddie Kennison. They had Dante Hall. He was an amazing return man, also a wide receiver. He reminded me a little bit of Barry Sanders with some of the moves that he would make, where he could just shift gears easily and make these shifty and crafty moves and make defenders miss. It was awesome. I would say right next to Devin Hester, he's probably the best return man I've ever seen. Then you had who was probably my favorite player, Priest Holmes. I definitely am a fan of that. Established the run game. It was very popular back in that era because you had running backs like Priest Holmes, Ricky Williams, LaDainian Tomlinson, Sean Alexander, Clinton Portis. You had just a lot of great running backs that could carry the load offensively for their teams and were a headache to deal with for the defenses. Curtis Martin is another one that comes to mind. Corey Dillon. There was just a lot of really good running backs during that time. Marshall Faulk, he was one of the best dual threat running backs where he could run the ball, but he could also catch the ball very well. Edgar and James, he played for the Colts with Peyton Manning. Deuce McAllister and Almon Green. There were a lot of really good running backs because back then the running game was emphasized a lot more than it is now. And that's not to say one way is better than the other. Although of course, the Super Bowl was disappointing for me because the Chiefs lost. Not just lost, but they got taken out to the woodshed. But at the same time, it was refreshing as a football fan, just separating myself just as a pure football fan, to see a team that relied so heavily on the run win it. And the Eagles, Jalen Hurts is a great quarterback. And when you have Saquon Barkley in the backfield, it makes your job as quarterback, I'm sure, a lot easier. And not to say that Jalen Hurts isn't an excellent quarterback and couldn't do it without Saquon, but having Saquon definitely helps. And then when you have Jalen Hurts, who is also mobile, it just makes for a very potent offense because you have to deal with both. And then, of course, there are all-star receivers and Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown and Dallas Goedert, who's an excellent tight end. And then their defense, of course, was what really helped them win because they applied pressure on Patrick Mahomes all game long without having to blitz. And so that really helped them. And kudos to them. Congratulations to the Philadelphia Eagles. They played a fantastic game and came in prepared and just whipped our tails. And so as part of Chiefs Kingdom, I just salute them and say congratulations and very well earned. I actually didn't end up watching the Super Bowl because I felt God was wanting me to fast that time because I'm always so invested in the game, especially when the Chiefs are playing. And the Chiefs have been playing in the Super Bowl often since about 2019. 2020, and I get invested in those games, and I just felt that he wanted me to take a step back, especially since it was right before I started the podcast. And I wanted to really dedicate that time to him and to just surrender it to him and say, hey, this is like my first fruit sacrifice. I really want to be watching the game, but I'm going to spend it with you because you're more important. As I've mentioned in my informational video, Jesus will always supersede any sport, any team. He's my first, he's my always. And so I was happy to do that. It was a great time with him. I did see highlights of it. And as a Chiefs fan, it stung to know that we didn't win. I was really looking forward to being the first team that three-peated. So difficult to do. But at the same time, as a football fan, it was refreshing to see a team win that was like, you know what, we're not going to pass it 60 times a game. I'm glad to see that there are teams trying to instill different identities based on their roster, their talent, their skill set, who they are, and try to use that and say, hey, you got to beat us at our game. If you do, kudos to you, but we're going to play our game, our style of football, and it's up to you to stop it. And so it was refreshing in that sense to see an offense that relied heavily on their run game and their defense to actually win it and show that style of football can still prevail in the NFL. And so there's a little bit about my Kansas City Chiefs fandom. We'll see if they can stay healthy. And I know that they're making some roster moves to help change things up and maybe head in a new direction. But it'll be interesting to see what they do. So it's an exciting time for the NFL. And it's great. Like I said, I'm just appreciating the time where the Chiefs are doing well. And I'm trying to be grateful for that with the knowledge that their fan base is still waiting for their team to win a Super Bowl or to even make it to a Super Bowl. And so I just thank God for the experience and just pray that he'll keep me humble. Sometimes I can get crazy here in the games. Ask my friend Larry. But not in an unchristian way. Let me make sure it's not like I'm spewing vulgarities or anything like that or expletives. I just get passionate is what I mean. But I love that the NFL is doing so well. I'm excited about the draft. College football, just briefly, again, following in my dad's footsteps. He grew up rooting for the Ohio State Buckeyes, and so I have been a Buckeyes fan since the Jim Tressel days. I remember that championship where we won against Miami, and that was a great game. And I just remember that was really the first championship in a collegiate or professional level that I experienced. It was exciting. I remember getting an Ohio State shirt to celebrate. And it was a great time to be a Buckeyes fan. I still love being a Buckeyes fan. This past year was excellent because we won the national championship. At the same time, I think the best news from college football came when I heard about these revivals, student athletes giving their hearts to Christ, not just at Ohio State, but on campuses all over the nation. And so that was such great news. That's the best news, honestly. It's even better news than if your team wins a Super Bowl, because you're talking about souls being saved and lives being surrendered to Jesus Christ. We're talking eternity. And so that really made me smile, made me happy, because that's the thing that really we should all be cheering for the most. That's when someone comes to Christ and surrenders themselves and says, I want to spend eternity with you, Jesus. And so I want to turn my life around and give my life to you and live for you on this earth so I can live with you in eternity, knowing that he's promised us his Holy Spirit to help us walk this life and to be the salt and light that he's called us to be. That was probably my favorite sports headline this past year, was that these collegiate football players, collegiate athletes of different sports on different campuses around the nation were giving their hearts to Christ. They were being baptized. They were reading the Bible and just surrendering to Jesus. That was really cool. That's awesome. That makes me really happy. And I'm glad that there'll be more people in heaven because of what he's doing on these campuses, what the Holy Spirit is doing on these campuses. But yeah, it was a good year to be an Ohio State fan. It was a good year to be a Chiefs fan, even though we lost the Super Bowl. It was just a good football year. I'm looking forward to this upcoming year and watching to see what Patrick Mahomes can do. I'm going to enjoy Travis Kelce's swan song, his final year, and I'm looking forward to see what happens, what happens in the draft. So there's a bit about me and my football journey. I'll definitely be talking a lot about football on this channel because that's probably my favorite sport. But I will also be talking about quite a few other sports as well. But I appreciate you guys taking the time to come check this episode out. Thank you very much. I hope that you'll like the video and that you'll subscribe. But I just appreciate your support and watching this video with me as we connect on sports and lifting up the name of Christ. If you don't know Christ, I urge you, get to know him. He wants to know you so much and to have a relationship with you and to just be part of your everyday life. He loves you and he is waiting for you to talk to him and allow him to be part of your everyday life and to guide and direct you, for I know he has great plans for all of you, for each of us. Don't be afraid to reach out to him. God bless you guys. Thanks once again. Have a wonderful day, and we'll talk next time.